Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're zooming out, way out actually.
Hmm.
We're looking at a phenomenon that's basically as old as humanity itself, but it's something you usually only think about when you see a breaking news headline or like a scary graph on a screen.
Right. We're talking about the movement of people.
Exactly. Migration. But the goal today isn't just to look at a map and draw arrows from point A to point B.
Yeah, that's the textbook way of doing it.
Right. We really want to understand the why. Because when you strip away the politics and the rhetoric, migration is a human story. It's a decision, usually a really hard one. It's a calculation.
It is a calculation, and it's rarely a random one. That's what's so fascinating about this. Whether we're talking about massive historical waves of people thousands of years ago, or just a single family packing up a car this morning, there is almost always a structure to that decision.
So the source material we are diving into today is titled The Push and Pull of Global Migration Dynamics. It covers the geography of why people move, specifically focusing on AP Human Geography Topic 2.10.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission today is to uncover the specific mechanisms under the hood. We really want to figure out the how and the why, what forces are actually at play when someone decides to leave everything they know behind.
And to do that, we have to start with the fundamental framework that geographers use to make sense of all this chaos. It's called the push-pull framework.
Okay, let's unpack this push and pull. It sounds like a workout routine, but I assume we're talking about motivation.
Precisely. Think of it as a balance sheet. Every potential migrant has one in their head, whether they realize it or not. On one side, you have the push factors. These are the negative conditions at the origin, the place where you currently are.
Okay.
These are the things basically shouting at you, you have to leave!
So these are the deal breakers.
Exactly. Poverty, war, discrimination. The reasons why staying is just no longer an option, it's the force that ejects you from your home.
And on the other side.
The pull factors. These are the attractive attributes of the destination. It's not just about leaving, it's about why you go there specifically. Why that specific city? Why that country?
Right, because you have options.
Usually, yes. Maybe it's better wages, maybe it's safety, maybe it's just a warmer climate.
So migration isn't usually driven by just one thing. It's a balance. It's the tension between these two forces. One pushes you out, the other pulls you in.
Exactly, it's an interplay. But before we get into the specific drivers, and there are 5 big ones we need to cover,
Right.
we do need to get our terminology straight.
Yeah, we should set the terms so everyone is grounded.
Because people tend to use migration words interchangeably, and they actually mean very different things.
Oh, I know this one. It's the classic migration, emigration, and immigration mix-up. I feel like I get this wrong half the time. Help us out here.
It's simpler than it sounds, but it's all about perspective. Migration is just the umbrella term. It's the general movement from one place to another.
Mm-hmm.
But the other two depend entirely on where you are standing when you describe the person moving.
Okay, hit me.
Emigration, starting with an E, is the act of leaving a home region. It's migration from the perspective of the origin. You're exiting.
E for exit. That is a great way to remember it.
Right. And immigration, starting with an I, is the act of arriving in a new region. It's from the perspective of the destination. You are coming in.
Simple enough. So if I move from New York to London to my friends in New York, I am an immigrant because I exited. But to my new neighbors in London, I am an immigrant because I came in.
You've got it. And while that sounds like semantics, it matters for policymakers. Are you worried about people leaving your region? That's an immigration dynamic. Are you worried about how to house people arriving? That's an immigration dynamic.
That makes total sense. Now, that sounds simple in theory. You calculate the push, you see the pull, and you move.
Mm-hmm.
But as the roadmap for today shows, we have to talk about the messy reality of the journey itself first. Getting from point A to point B is rarely a straight line.
No, it almost never is. Migration rarely happens all at once. It happens in phases. This is the part of the research that geographers call intervening obstacles.
This really stood out to me. We tend to think of migration as, I pack my bags, I get on a plane, I arrive.
Right.
But the source material notes that getting from A to B has real barriers. Historically, and even today, the journey itself is trying to stop you.
The biggest enemy is usually just physics, distance.
Just the sheer miles.
Exactly. Moving is expensive. It takes time. These are physical and economic barriers. We're talking about oceans, deserts, mountain ranges. If you're a migrant with limited resources, simply traversing the physical landscape is the first major hurdle.
But it's not just mountains anymore. Now it's invisible walls, too.
Right. Political obstacles, legal restrictions, borders, visas. Governments can basically erect giant do not enter signs.
The sources mentioned a specific historical example that was pretty stark, the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Yes, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. This is a major historical example of a political obstacle. The United States government passed a law specifically banning a specific group from immigrating.
So even if the pull factors of the U.S. were incredibly strong, like jobs, safety, a new start, that political obstacle just cut the cord.
Completely blocked the path. It shows that migration isn't just about individual will, it's heavily dictated by what the state allows.
And then there are cultural obstacles too, right? Like even if you can physically get there and legally get in.
You might face a language barrier or fears of social integration. Those are psychological and social walls that can be just as hard to climb as a mountain. If you feel like you'll never belong or the local culture is too alien, that's a massive obstacle.
Okay, so those are the obstacles. But then there's this other concept that I actually have found really fascinating. Intervening opportunities.
Ah, yes. This is the plot twist in the migration story.
I love a good plot twist. Explain this one for us.
So, an intervening opportunity is an unforeseen benefit you encounter during the journey. Imagine you're migrating from a rural town to a big metropolis on the coast. That's the plan. Point A to point B.
Got it.
But halfway there, maybe you run out of money. You stop in a third location just to work for a few weeks to earn gas money.
Just a temporary pit stop.
Exactly. But while you're in that third location, you find a really great job. Maybe you find affordable housing. Or maybe you meet someone and fall in love.
Wow.
Suddenly, that original destination doesn't look so important anymore. You decide to settle there instead.
So the destination literally changes because of the journey.
Precisely. And it doesn't just have to be a job. Educational opportunities play a huge role here, too.
Like what?
Well, access to training programs along the way can also stop the journey early. You stop in a town, find out there's a free nursing certification program, and you stay.
It really highlights how fluid this whole process is. We make these grand plans, but sometimes the middle of nowhere turns out to be somewhere.
It does. Now, even with those obstacles and opportunities modifying the path, people are still fundamentally driven to move. And the source material breaks this down into 5 big drivers.
All right, let's run through these. I'm going
Yeah.
to have to start with the big one. The one that, according to the overview, is the #1 most prevalent reason for global migration.
Economics.
Money talks.
It absolutely does. Specifically, the search for employment. When you look at the mechanism here, the strongest current is almost always flowing from places with fewer jobs to places with more jobs.
So the push factor is poverty or lack of jobs.
Right.
And the pull factor is higher wages or professional advancement.
Simple supply and demand of labor.
The source gave a really clear historical case study of this from mid-20th century China.
Yes. This is a classic example of mechanization driving internal migration. As farming in China became more mechanized,
Which is a push factor.
exactly, you needed fewer human hands to work the fields. That created a massive push factor in rural areas.
And the agricultural jobs just vanished.
They did. At the same time, China's cities were industrializing and desperately needed labor, so you saw this massive shift, rural populations moving to urban areas in massive numbers just to find work.
There was another historical case study that I found super interesting because it wasn't just organic movement, it was orchestrated. The Bracero program during World War II.
This is a crucial one because it shows how governments can artificially create pull factors.
Set the context for us.
It's the 1940s. The United States is fighting World War II. Millions of American men are leaving their jobs to go fight overseas. So the U.S. suddenly has a massive labor shortage, specifically in agriculture and transportation.
So the farms are empty, but the country still needs food.
Exactly. So what happens? The U.S. and Mexican governments sign an agreement. The Bracero program legally brought over 4 million Mexican workers across the border to fill those vacant roles.
4 million. That is a staggering number.
It was. It's a prime example of a government-orchestrated pull factor. The U.S. basically turned on a massive magnet for labor, and workers in Mexico, facing their own economic push factors, responded.
Okay, so that's the economic driver. But the second driver is a lot more volatile.
Political drivers. This is where we move from seeking a better life to seeking a safe life.
And the stakes are obviously much higher here. The push factors are things like war, civil conflict, and oppressive regimes. And the pull factors are stable governments and the protection of rights.
And unfortunately, we have plenty of contemporary examples of this volatility.
Yeah, the source material lists a few specific recent examples, and to be clear to you listening, we're just impartially reporting the facts laid out in the text here.
Right.
Starting with Ukraine in 2022.
A very clear, tragic example. The Russian invasion created immediate, widespread insecurity. That acts as a massive push factor. It caused approximately 6 million Ukrainians to migrate to Europe and beyond.
And then there's Syria.
The Syrian civil war, which began in 2011 and is ongoing, that conflict has led to the emigration of over 5 million people seeking safety. Again, the primary driver isn't wages, it's survival.
And the source provides one more example from the Americas, Venezuela in 1999.
Right. The rise of Hugo Chavez and the subsequent suppression of critics and the press acted as a severe push factor.
Right, the loss of civil liberties.
Exactly. It pushed citizens to seek freedom and political stability elsewhere. When basic safety and freedom are threatened, emigration skyrockets.
It's a very clear pattern. All right, let's move to the third driver. Cultural and demographic drivers. This is about identity and population.
Let's take the cultural side first. This often deals with social identity, family networks, or persecution.
The history books give us a great American example of this. The Mormon migration in the 19th century.
Yes, this is a fascinating historical example of cultural migration. You had adherents of Mormonism living in places like Illinois and Missouri.
But they were facing significant violence and persecution because of their beliefs.
Right, which is the ultimate cultural push factor.
So they didn't just move to the next state over.
No, they went all the way to the Utah Territory. At the time, the pull factor there was simply isolation. It offered freedom from interference. They wanted a place where their social identity wouldn't be a target.
So sometimes the pull isn't a bustling economy. Sometimes it's just safety and isolation.
Exactly. Now, on the demographic side, it's less about persecution and more about connecting the dots on global population balances.
How so?
Think of it like a puzzle piece fit. The push factor happens in countries with overpopulation and high unemployment. Lots of young people, not enough jobs.
Okay.
The pull factor happens in developed countries with aging populations and thin workforces. They literally need labor to keep their economies running.
So the overpopulated regions naturally flowed toward the aging regions to fill the gap. It's a demographic balancing act.
It is. It explains a massive amount of global movement today.
All right, driver number 4, environmental drivers. Disaster and comfort.
This is migration driven by the physical world, and the source distinguishes between two distinct types: sudden and gradual.
Sudden seems pretty self-explanatory. Disasters. And the source cites Hurricane Katrina in 2005.
A very grim example. The devastation in New Orleans was so severe that it pushed over 1 million Americans to migrate from the city to other states.
Over 1 million people. That's a massive sudden shift.
It is, but then you have gradual environmental migration, which is much more about preference.
Right. And here we have to talk about the Sun Belt migration in the mid-20th century.
A huge demographic shift in the United States.
And while the text notes it was partly economic, a major pull factor was the climate. And I have to quote the source directly here because it's just so specific regarding the motivation. People wanted to escape the, quote, but cold winters of the Midwest and Northeast.
Highly technical geographic term there.
Extremely technical. But, I mean, if you have a choice between shoveling snow in February or sitting by a pool in Arizona, that's a pretty strong pull factor.
It absolutely is. People seek comfort. Milder climates are powerful magnets over a gradual period.
So we've covered the 5 drivers: economic, political, cultural, demographic, and environmental. What's the synthesis here? Why do we need to understand all these mechanics?
Because migration is essential for geographers and policymakers to predict population patterns.
Right.
If you don't understand the why, you can't manage the reality on the ground. It's about urban planning, managing cultural diffusion, and facilitating social integration.
So to recap for everyone listening, every migrant story is a mix of these 5 factors, plus the obstacles and opportunities met along the way. You don't just move, you navigate this massive web of push and pull.
You really do. And actually, thinking about that web brings me to a final provocative thought I'd love to leave you all with. It connects back to that concept of intervening opportunities.
Lay it on us.
We often tell our family histories as if our ancestors had this grand master plan to end up exactly where we are today.
Right, like it was destiny.
Exactly. But if migration is so often stopped by unforeseen opportunities along the way, a random job offer, running out of money, a chance romance, how many of you are living where you are right now simply because your ancestors got stuck somewhere that turned out to be better than they expected?
That is, wow. That really makes you look at your hometown differently.
Yeah.
We might all just be the result of a happy accident on the way to somewhere else.
I suspect a great many of us are.
Something for you to mull over.
Mm.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.